Claire, great to have you on board. And I think the session that we're doing today, I think, it's one of the biggest levers that we have in organizational success. And that's how we align our whole storytelling with the board. And you know what? Yeah. For me, if we're not aligned to the people who are steering the ship, we're kind of goosed a little bit. So it really is important that we put this in place. And today, Claire, we are absolutely delighted to have you on board. And we've had a number of chats. And what we love about our conversations is your simplicity of storytelling. It really is brilliant. And, I know you've launched your book. In fact, why don't I ask you, before we kick off, give us a very quick brief on who is Claire White? Thank you. Start that way.
Goodness, brief. So I am a customer experience consultant. I have a consultancy firm called Connected CX, which stands for customer experience. And I've had the business for about a year and a half. And before that, 25 years working in customer experience and customer success roles, working with large blue chip organizations like P&G, Microsoft, Disney. I think these are global brands we're all familiar with. Working in marketing agencies, delivering solutions for their brands. And then the kind of 13 years before my business, I was working in a marketing agency, targeted marketing agency, so all about personalization for two of the biggest grocery retailers in the UK, Morrisons and Sainsbury's, which hopefully some of you are aware of. These organizations are where essentially I really learned about customer experience, because retail is at the forefront, I think, of customer experience, or has in the past been. And I learn about critical metrics that we need to deliver upon, how we drive revenue and how we drive performance through focusing on the customer and customer experience. So hopefully I can share some of those with you today. I'm also an author. So I have a book, You've Got the Power, 6 Principles for Business Success, which is all about business strategy, focused around a human-centered approach to business and focusing on your employees and your customers.
And before we start, Claire, if I want to get in touch with you after the session today, Connected CX, is that, give me your web address while we have you here. And everybody, we will post this in the notes that you will get, but how do we get in touch with you?
www.connectedcx.org.uk is the website. You can go to contact us and get in touch that way, or get in touch with me on LinkedIn. I am LinkedIn, Claire White, CXAD Dip on LinkedIn, so come and find me.
Beautiful. Okay, let's kick off. A fascinating subject, really is, and it's something that I'm glad that we're covering. But to me, let's start off with, and I'm not looking for any medical solutions here, but what keeps the board awake at night, and how can we help? How can we, as CX practitioners or people in that space, address that? And I know you and I have had a lot of chat about, there's going to be staff issues that they will always be concerned about. There's going to be shareholder value issues. There's going to be churn and acquisition issues. Where do you start by answering that question? Over to you, Claire.
Wow, it's a big question. But I think if we try and make it really simple, and just think about what is the board's job. And the board are paid to deliver sustainable value to their shareholders and consistent, sustainable growth. They're not after short-term wins. And I think some of what we see makes us think, that's short-term, not long-term. But actually, as a board, they are responsible for thinking long-term and for delivering long-term growth. And the ways in which they do that, I guess some of the key metrics that they'll be looking at will be revenue growth, which we probably all recognize. We know that as CX leaders, we always have there are always targets to deliver based on revenue. There's margin protection, because margin ultimately is going to deliver that profit that shareholders need and require. Risk reduction. If you've ever been in an operational board meeting, you will have heard risk mentioned a lot. And I think whenever there is a list of activities that the company will be going after or progressing, everything comes with a risk measurement. So risk reduction is very important. And then probably finally, it's brand equity. They are responsible for brand equity and ensuring that there is equity in their brand and protecting reputation. All of those, if we think about customer experience, we can affect. Customer experience effects. So broadly, those I think are the key areas that boards are focused on.
Claire, I mean, you've said it so beautifully. I mean, boards are not after short-term wins. It's really long-term direction. I buy into that. I completely buy into it. I think that's a really great way of positioning it. But here's the question. Do they? Are they genuinely focused today in our world on long-term direction, or are they still caught up in all of this short-term tactical execution? What is your experience in that? I mean, certainly, my experience is the latter. Unfortunately, I do feel that they're under day-to-day pressures to meet. What's your thoughts on that?
Sadly, I think I'd agree that particularly what we're seeing in the market at the moment, because it's a very challenging market for any business,
Yeah,
I think we are seeing more short-term priorities and short-term activities implemented. We're going to talk about AI, I think, at some point, and I think AI is one of those things that's being jumped on because their boards are seeing that as something that can reduce cost to serve in a really simple way. Sadly, and we'll talk about this a bit, I think it's being done in the wrong way and it's causing reputational damage.
yeah.
I think, though, despite the short-term focus, the key metrics still remain revenue growth, margin protection, risk reduction, and brand equity, as well as employee attrition, ultimately. But I think that's cost to serve.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So again, from a CX perspective, we're talking about, how do we make sure that we are supporting our boards or those key decisions that they're making in terms of, from a customer focus perspective rather than a shareholder focus perspective? Because I just get a sense, and a lot of us feel this time and time again. There are boards out there that are fixated with meeting the shareholders' needs and they get rewarded for hitting those key numbers. And isn't it our duty to say, well, hold on a sec, the customer focus needs are so critical as well. What's our role in helping them deliver that?
I think it shouldn't be a trade-off. It's a balance because ultimately, in order to deliver that profit and that shareholder value, as CX leaders, we need to be changing the narrative that says CX can do that. CX does that. CX focuses on customer lifetime value. And the levers which affect that ultimately are retention, so reducing that churn. It's advocacy, so it's getting that reducing cost to serve through acquisition. And it's ensuring that those customers are continuing to buy and buying more. And ultimately, all of those things fit within customer experience because if customers aren't having that good experience, churn will increase. Your revenue growth will go down, your profits will go down because your cost to serve increases. And we all know that acquisition is between, up to 25% more costly than growing the existing customer base that you have and growing that customer lifetime value. So I think we need to just change the way in which we're speaking and make it really clear to boards that everything we talk about, whether it's NPS or CSAT, directly influences and has an impact on those critical measures that are important to them.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Siobhan, you can jump in on this conversation too, because we Claire, you're aware we do an annual report where we look at the best companies and the lowest ranking CX companies, and we chart them and we put them in league tables, etc. And there's a consistent view here. The top 10 or 15 or 20 brands each year, we know them as being absolutely customer focused. So, for instance, you might get instead of a bank being in the top 10, it's a credit union. They have members. And when a member walks into a credit union, they get a hug. If you walk into a bank and they're generally at the lower end of the thing, you get an interview. So there's this issue that we see time and time again. All of the big tech companies, the Facebooks, the Googles, and the Netflix, they're all at the bottom of the league table in terms of customer experience delivery. And why is that? Because they are focused on shareholder value. Now, is there anything wrong with that? Or is it our duty to try and get those companies to hit that balance? Siobhan, have you anything to add to that? It really is. It's quite obvious. We see it all the time. How do we just maintain that balance? And are the boards listening to us?
Yeah, and I think, when we talk about it, and you mentioned there those people at the bottom of the pile being focused on shareholder value. But let's be clear, the companies who are at the top of the pile in terms of customer experience are just as focused on shareholder value. So they're not trading off that focus. They're not just focusing solely on shareholder value. They're focusing on delivering a great experience, and they know that that will improve their shareholder value. It's going to, as to the metrics that Claire talked about, it's going to translate to increased revenue from increased sales, cross sales. It's going to mean less churn from your customers, less attrition from your staff. So those companies at the bottom, and Claire, we've had this conversation before, and I think your insights on it were really, really eye-opening as well. It was around those ones at the bottom. They've either identified a real niche in terms of a customer need, and they've built their whole business around that, and they're ruthless in how they deliver that. So they mightn't be looking at, delivering an amazing and what we would call CX excellence in every interaction, but they have focused on a real clear customer need. So I won't name names, but if we think about low-cost airline that are focused on very much on shareholder value, but they've identified a need within a segment in the population, a large segment of the population. They need to they want to travel, and they need to do that at a low cost. So how they position themselves and what they do is completely aligned, and they really importantly, they manage expectations. So therefore, they are delivering an experience. It's not what we would call CX excellence, but they are focused on shareholder value, absolutely, but they're still focused on delivering a customer need, just as the people and the companies at the top of that leadership table, in terms of CX excellence. The companies at the top are also focused on shareholder value. They just do it by delivering a great experience.
Yeah.
And Claire, what you mentioned yesterday about, what are the commonalities between those organizations at the bottom that still are very profitable, but may not deliver traditional CX excellence?
Yeah, exactly. Because they've either identified that one need, and they're very, very clear about, this is what we do, this is what we don't do, and we don't really care about what we don't do. But if this is what you want, we're the people. Or they're a monopoly. I think some of the organizations in that bottom are so super big, none of their competitors, their challenger brands, can actually make any impact or inroads into that. So they have got a massive corner of that market. So I would say, those two, but absolutely a good response.
Beautiful. Let's move on, move away from the kind of the board's profitability and their focus in that space, and move into something that we all would accept is probably one of the key issues for delivering CX excellence. And I want to just talk a bit about what the board's role here. And this is the key issue of just working in silos. We talk about this all the time about how we can break them down, etc. And so from our own perspective, how do we as CX practitioners, how do we as department heads help the board break down those silos and get employees working better amongst each other? What's your thinking around that, Claire? Is there a process there that you can advise us on?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just thinking about just talking about departments working in silos just for a minute.
Sure.
I think typically that happens because goals aren't aligned. So for some reason, there isn't an alignment at a board level, and this does happen. And there's agendas at play, which mean that actually translates at a departmental level of operating in silos. So I think firstly, as a CX professional, and I think the CX Academy does talk about this, but having those influential relationships across departments to help identify that working together, because you all have common issues and challenges that maybe they don't understand are connected. It's helping them to join the dots. It's helping them to understand, okay, if employees are having a bad experience here because a process is broken, the likelihood is your customers are not having a great experience. The likelihood is that there's something going wrong in the systems and teams and operational. We need to fix this, because if you fix this one thing, it's going to have an impact across all those departments, positive impact. Ultimately, it's going to increase probably revenue growth because more customers are going to have a better experience. It's going to reduce your cost to serve because you're not firefighting, which is a huge, huge cost to businesses. And ultimately, that's all going to ladder up into great improvement metrics for the board. So I think that's how, as CX leaders, we can really get behind driving that alignment across departments and helping people to see that if we work together, we will solve the problems we commonly have. And a good framework and approach to do that is customer journey mapping and employee journey mapping.
Yeah.
Journey mapping helps to really identify those pain points that employees and customers are having, and ultimately help you to prioritize what needs to be fixed first to deliver on the metrics that are important to the board.
Brilliant, brilliant. Claire, I'm going to give you a break for a second, and Siobhan, I'm going to get into your mindset here. One of, I suspect, the key concerns for any board is reputational damage. And I know you and I were talking about McDonald's recently, and the AI. Sorry, you might share that with us. But again, CX is there to support and to avoid and to any significant corporation from running into those issues. Any thoughts on that? And I'll come to you on this as well, Claire. But just to give you a break, Siobhan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and before I come to that question, Michael, I might need you to summarize that for me again when I get this point across. I just want to touch on what Claire was talking about and that last question that you asked around, that aligning the organization better and working better together across at a board level. And if we think about that board, the people on the board and people at that level, they're generally very numbers driven because they're working to certain targets and certain which ultimately impact the bottom line every month, every quarter, every year. So it's so important that we're giving them the right metrics, right? And for everyone to work together cohesively and cross-functionally, we all need a North Star. And that North Star is usually a really strong company vision. And if that vision is focused on product or service, it's not going to inspire in the same way, and it's not going to give you and the group the same agility and passion. It needs to be, if we think about organizations that are really truly customer centric and truly successful, and everyone works together cohesively, like Disney are one of the longest serving organizations, most successful organizations in the world. And their mission and vision is all about creating happiness. So that allows them to work towards that North Star, regardless of what the product or service is that they're delivering. So my two key takeaways on that last question are around metrics. So aligning everybody at a board level and across departments, it's getting the right metrics in front of them. And customer lifetime value, I know we've talked about that, and I'm sure we'll talk about that again, is so crucial because customer lifetime value translates to the bottom line.
No,
and it's something that can bring people across, can merge across everyone on the board. And then the other thing is making sure that the vision and mission having a really clear customer focused vision and mission that aligns everybody as well. They're two of the key fundamental things to have a board that is focused and aligned.
Thanks for adding that. No, I appreciate that. Okay, so that I'm going to repeat the first question. Or sorry, the other question.
The reputation.
To give Claire, you're going to have a great old break here now. So back to you, Siobhan. On that note, we talked about one of the key reasons I suspect that are one of the key things that boards are extremely afraid of, and that is reputational damage. I mean, there's many things that they're concerned of, customer churn, staff retention, but reputational damage is quite significant. And it's probably one of those items that allows for CX investment, because when you get great CX delivered within the organization, reputational damage is generally written off. What are your thoughts? And you and I were talking about the McDonald's AI story, and maybe you can share that and how that addresses this particular question.
Absolutely. And we talk about a burning platform in our courses. We talk about, getting buy-in and getting support at the board level. And we talk about a burning platform actually being really useful. And burning platform, for those of you who may not be as familiar with the term, is basically an issue within the organization that if it's left to burn, if it's left alone, it's gonna have serious impact, be it financial, reputational, and they're both interlinked. It's important that we talk about, Claire, you talked about risk at the beginning, and risk being a key driver and key buzzword for that board. And reputational risk is a real concern for any organization. So it's important to highlight how customer experience can support in developing a positive reputation, and how a poor customer experience can have the opposite effect. But yeah, there is a fantastic example of, we talk about making sure that we test and learn in terms of anything we do with customer experience. And I'm sure it was tested with McDonald's, but maybe not as sufficiently as it should have been. So one of the, I suppose, more high profile reputational damage to an organization that it comes from McDonald's, and basically they rolled out AI in their drive-through ordering process, and they rolled it out to hundreds of their drive-throughs in the States, and it was an absolutely horrendous experience. People were getting the wrong orders. The responses weren't making sense. There was a few viral videos on it, and they had to roll back that technology and I think the risk there, I know we're going to talk about AI more so in a few minutes, but there's a real risk with AI and customer experience. And that is that if you focus on just using technology and not getting that balance between the technology and the human touch right, you're going to annoy customers, you're going to lose customers, and you're going to have an impact on your reputation that is going to get the board's attention. But yeah, that McDonald's one was, I suppose, one of the more high profile examples of an experience, a poor customer experience that impacted reputation.
Claire, do you want to add anything to reputational risk?
Yeah, I think businesses, I think boards don't necessarily realize the impact that customer experience has around reputational damage, and how they can protect and ensure that it doesn't happen. AI, we're going to talk more about AI, but there are other examples. I think Mango used AI models in their advertising, and that resulted in consumers losing trust. And we all know that trust is the foundation to any relationship. And I think the more and more businesses are using AI, the more they are likely to not do very well doing that. I think there is a statistic which around 30% of organizations are implementing AI poorly, and the result is the impact on customer experience. So it's really, really important when thinking about reputation that customer experience teams are, I guess, enabled to actually have give feedback and highlight risks to the board directly where they're seeing these potential challenges occur. And I think a lot, we've talked about how do we change how we talk to boards when it comes to CX. And I think one is the risk of not doing something. And that this is massive when it comes to reputational damage. So I think if we start talking in those terms, then we're going to start getting more engagement from board and ultimately more support for the activities and initiatives that we're doing.
No, I love it. I love it. And Siobhan, I think you'd mentioned that boards love metrics. The board members really into that space. And I think Claire, you talk about that North Star. Is it? I mean, let's just have a look at that before we dig deep into the AI challenges ahead of us. In terms of the North Star metric, Claire, any insight, any view there about what they're buying into themselves in terms of the board itself? What's the key? What are the key numbers out there that they're looking at?
Well, I
Or
think it
seeing?
does. Yeah, I think it does come down to they're always looking at obviously their profit lines. They're always looking at their revenue growth, and they're always looking at their forecast for the next year. They always focus on the next quarter because they have quarterly shareholder meetings, and this is where they are really put under the cosh and they have to
Hmm.
deliver on those numbers. I think where maybe they are missing, or metrics that they may be missing, and Siobhan did touch on this, is potentially customer lifetime value, which is a lever that if it goes up, ultimately your profits are going to increase, your revenue is going to increase, it's all going to be rosy. But actually, if your customer lifetime value goes down, your costs are going to increase. And obviously, that's something that boards massively look at. They will also be looking at brand metrics to make sure that their reputation and their brand equity is being protected. So I think these are the terms that we need to start using when we're linking any of our activity to a commercial outcome, because this is where the boards are going to pay attention, I think.
Yeah, and I like to think, boards are not after short-term wins. They're kind of that long-term direction of a board. And that's why I lean into lifetime value. I really do. I kind of lean in because to me that is it is a long-term kind of metric. A lot of the others are kind of tactical short-term. Very, very important, possibly more for departments within an organization because as long as they are aligned to the overall. But to me, from that perspective, I do always find that the lifetime value, it not only does it cover retention and churn, it also recovers acquisition because those customers, if they're staying with you, they're the ones who are out there selling your brand on behalf of your business, and they're so much more believable. So I do think there's a lot more weight moving into that LTV type metric, which is important. Siobhan, anything to sprinkle on top of that?
I think, look, if we think back to what's usually in the board report, if they have customer lifetime value in, they're absolutely fantastic. But the stat that is generally in the board report is NPS. But actually, how much do they really care about NPS? How much impact is going to have on them if it moves up or down? And I suppose the organizations that are focused on it and are focused on the experience and do really well. And I know some of the organizations that we're working with who are able to tie a dollar number to their NPS, to their promoters and to their detractors. And they can see then if you're seeing an X point increase in your NPS, what that means in terms of dollar value to the bottom line. So not a lot of organizations are doing that. And it is challenging to do because you need to work with your finance teams and whoever else to understand that metric, that value behind those customers. But ultimately, with most things with the board, you need to bring it back to a dollar number. So what metrics are in that board report, understanding what's in there and being able to link those back to the customer experience and to a dollar value as well.
Love it. Love it. Let's move into the AI because it's such a critical discussion that's taking place. And it was funny, Siobhan, you'll recall this, and there are some people who are on this call from Saudi as well. I was very lucky and honored to do a presentation last week at the World Congress. And one of the things we talked about was that with CX it's in that kind of routine kind of element. And I talked about routine CX is like fast food. It's, zero friction, zero conversation, get in, get out. But it's a good experience. Whereas high stakes CX is all about fine dining, care, expertise, attention. You feel loved and valued when you leave. When you sit down with a board and say, this is, it's all about trying to get that balance right, isn't it? So from our own perspective, Claire, let's start with you. How do we advise the board on what direction we go? Do we go deep dive into AI, or is it something we do step by step and proof, etc.? What are your thoughts?
Well, firstly, I think that the AI strategy has to be led by the top. It has to be led by the board. And actually, it has to be aligned across the organization. Because I think something I have seen with some clients I've worked with actually is that AI has been adopted at a department level for different tasks. And what that has meant is that it's not been joined up and actually it hasn't been aligned across the organization, which ultimately can give an inconsistent customer experience. So I think that's the number one thing. I think number two, with AI, test. Make sure that you start with the customer or the employee problem to start with, because AI should be to augment the experience, not to replace. We all need human contact, and there must always be a human option when we're using AI. And then once you've identified the problem that you want to help, solve, the process that maybe the employees are finding difficult that you can literally take away from them using AI, then you do a small test to make sure it works. And that it's not going to backfire and cause increased workload on your employees or reputational damage because your customers have had a bad experience. And then once you've tested, you've reduced any risk, you're then able to scale confident that it's not going to negatively affect the experience for people in any way, whether that's employees or customers. So I think that's the starting point from my perspective.
No, I love it. Siobhan, anything to add to that, or will we move on?
I think I reiterate what Claire is saying there. The problem is that AI, it's like a race to see who can get it implemented quickest in most organizations. So I'm in operations and I can see that marketing are starting to use it for something. So I'm racing now to do it. And actually, that's not the right way to do it. As you say, Claire, it has to be done at a strategic level. There has to be an AI strategy. And yes, every department can use it, but they have to use it within the focus of that strategy. And the biggest challenge that we've done sessions with Amazon Web Services and with some of the big tech companies, and even they are saying that every organization they're dealing with has challenges in terms of their data. So you have to get your data right. And the board have to take responsibility for that in order to enable the organization to embed a really successful AI strategy. But you absolutely have to pilot it. So regardless of, whether you're doing it at a strategic level or a tactical level, hopefully it's at a strategic level, whatever you're doing, it's, the elephant is eaten piece by piece, whatever that analogy is, you have to do it little by little. And actually, again, if you're in a CX role and you're trying to manage upwards to the board, which is, if you're not on the board, that's what you should be doing. It's about showing the benefits to the organization, showing the benefits to the customer from your AI initiatives, and then using that to get momentum, to get buy-in, and to move forward.
I love it. And again, I'm conscious of time. I'm going to rip through a couple of more questions here, and then we'll get into the Q&A. But one of the things we tripped over as a group during the week in prepping for this session today was vulnerable customers. And we were kind of saying it's not a subject that most boards would get deep into. And when you start to add AI to that whole area, AI isn't really, is it going to put these vulnerable customers or audiences at greater risk? Siobhan, do you want to tackle that one first, and I'll pass it back to you, Claire?
Yeah, absolutely. So I come from a financial services background, and vulnerable customers absolutely would have been, I suppose, spoken about. You would have had vulnerable customer policies, as I'm sure all organizations and sectors do. But I think we need to take a bit of a step back here and say, actually, vulnerable customers aren't just this neat little segment over here. Actually, we can all be vulnerable customers at different points throughout our life, depending on our circumstances, depending on what's going on. And I had an experience myself recently with AI, using AI with an organization in what could have been, I suppose I could have been deemed a vulnerable customer at that point. So I was dealing with bereavement. My dad had passed away. I looked after his broadband, his TV, all of that. So I had to contact his broadband and TV provider to cancel it. And I knew from my experience with this particular very well-known international brand that if I attempted to ring them, I was going to be waiting for at least half an hour, and I just didn't have the time or patience for that. So in my potentially vulnerable state, I went on to their web chat, and it was clearly an AI bot that was responding to me. And my expectations were probably fairly low given my experience of trying to contact this organization over the phone. But as soon as I mentioned bereavement, and what was clear about what I was trying to do in the web chat, the bot recognized that, and I was transferred immediately to a human.
Wow.
Peter was his name, and Peter had a phenomenal impact on me because he was so quick. He was so empathetic. He recognized my loss. He recognized stress. He took all of the stress away because he was able to fix everything there and then, get it cancelled. He actually exceeded my expectations by arranging a refund of whatever was left on the account. And I said to him, I sent an email or a message back in afterwards, and I said, Peter, I am a customer of another organization, not yours. But I would actually, based on my experience with him, I would consider and will, when my contract is up for renewal, go back to that company.
Wow.
Because, and if we think about that balance of AI, and I know we talk about this a lot, and it's and boards need to take responsibility for that, but we are very much passionate about getting that balance between human and technology right. customers want choice. I chose to go onto that online channel because it was convenient for me. But actually, what I needed was the empathy of a human. So you have to make sure that they're working in tandem together. And that comes back to the board having a strategic AI approach.
Claire, how do you address that?
Absolutely. I mean, I agree. And I'm glad you had such a good experience in that kind of difficult situation. I think in financial services, because you have consumer duty, vulnerability is a thing that organizations really look deep into. Outside of that sector, I don't think there are no frameworks, there's no structure to say you need to be looking after vulnerable customers. So actually, I think it is down to CX leaders to make sure that that is clearly earmarked, that the board are clear on the impact of not ensuring those vulnerable customers are catered for and given the best experience possible, because ultimately that will result in reputational damage. I know we talked about that a lot, and it will result in churn, which ultimately will affect the critical metrics that the board are measuring. So I think, looking and implementing AI, A, quickly, B, for short-term wins, is not the right thing to do. And it needs to be thought about strategically. And there needs to be a roadmap for change rather than let's just implement this AI tool because we can reutilize these people elsewhere, because that's not the right thing to do.
I love it. I think you're bang on with that. And from our own perspective, one of the other things, and we'll finish off with this because I want to give some time to the Q&As that are coming through. We note that when people are presenting to boards, when departments are presenting to boards, they put a huge amount of effort. Like 90% of the effort is in capturing the actual data, and maybe a little bit less. You might only put about 10% into the analyzing of that data for the board, but very little time and effort goes into how we will tell our story to the board. Is there any advice, Claire, that you would give about how do we create narratives for the board, and particularly board members who are heads of different departments? I mean, they're all looking for something different. It's a real challenge, but I don't think we put enough effort into spending time in creating the story that they need to hear. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's two parts to that question for me. One is the departmental targets that they have, and a board will have probably a department dashboard that they'll look at, which will have the metrics that each department has and how they're actually performing against those. What that means is there probably isn't much alignment, and there's probably not much that's joined up. And I know we've talked about customer lifetime value. So I think that there is an opportunity for CX leaders. If that is the case and all departments don't really have a joined up goal, then maybe that is something you should be talking to other department leads about, and ultimately taking to your board with a proposal or a proposition if it's not there, because then that will mean everything that's being reported is more tangible, and it directly attributes to critical metrics that the board are measuring. When we're talking about what we take to the board, I think in my experience, a lot of the customer experience activity that has been presented to board is just that activity. So we tell them what we've been doing, and we say, this is what we've done this month. These are the initiatives that we've implemented, and this is what we're going to do next month. There isn't very much that is tangible commercial benefit that really directly drives either revenue growth or margin protection or risk reduction. And these are the things that we need to make sure we are linking whatever we're doing to, so that we are changing the perception of boards from customer experience being this fluffy, nice to have, we just make customers happy, to being actually customer experience is a critical area that can help us to predict revenue growth because of the things that they are doing, the initiatives that they're implementing in their area and across the business. So I think it's flipping that narrative. It's getting more concrete. And Siobhan, you've talked a lot about boards deal with numbers. So we need to really change the narrative from, yes, this is what we've done, but actually these are the numbers we're going to hit for you. And I think we've talked about this in the conversations we've had. Be very clear. If you're taking something to the board to ask for budget, be very clear what levers they're going to deliver upon. So what metrics are they going to deliver upon? But equally manage expectations on what they're not going to do. So for example, if you're taking something to the board and you say, this is going to drive your revenue, but there is a risk Make sure that you are very, very clear on what that risk is and that you mitigate that in any of the tests that you manage. So I know I've gone a bit off piece there, but I think that's an important thing to talk about and to mention.
No, but it leads beautifully into kind of a summary here, and I think you're going into that space. And we one of the questions we ask at all of these webinars, Claire, is if there were three key things that those in attendance today could take away from today's discussion, what might they be? What advice would you give us in 3 steps?
One, and I think we have mentioned, we'll mention this, make sure you understand what metrics are important to the board because not every business will be the same. Different sectors will have different metrics that are important, but make sure you understand what those are. Then if there is, understand which metrics you can drive and you can deliver upon as a customer experience area or leader. If customer lifetime value isn't something that's being talked about, I would build a proposal because I think it's such a critical metric in organizations that customer experience directly influences, and it would be very powerful for you as a CX leader. Lastly, if you don't have customer experience person on the board, if there's no CCO, you are that senior leader. Make sure you're in those meetings. Try and get into those meetings. If you can't get into those meetings, make sure that you've given enough information around the metrics that you are sharing or the information you're sharing that directly links back to those commercial areas that need to be delivered upon for the board. So I think those are the three.
Love it. And Siobhan, I'm going to ask you if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd add. I'm probably going to reiterate. Like for me, it's about yes, understanding what's in that board report, and making sure that you, when you're talking about customer experience, that you're showing how it influences those metrics that are currently there, and if they don't have the right metrics there, that you are petitioning to get those metrics in there, that you're developing dashboards, overviews that will give the board the metrics that you need them to focus on, and that will impact their bottom line. If you don't have, and I think one of the questions, and I know we'll become to Q&A in a minute, was around, getting director people at that level, or if there's director or CXO. If there isn't, you need to find out who, if you're at the most senior level of CX within your organization, but you're not at that leadership level or that highest level, then you need to find out who are your allies on that board and how can you start making a case for yourself to get on that board. And that comes from talking their language, making it clear about how you're going to fix the problems of the board and make it tangible. That's my third and final one. Make it tangible.
No.
Show, measure your progress, and show the impact of the bottom line.
Yeah. And this rides beautifully into the questions because I'm going to share one question to you, Claire, specifically from Matthew. Matthew's asking, how many of the businesses that you work with have a dedicated CX individual on the senior management team? So at director level, it still feels that a lot of businesses have CX merged as part of other roles, so it doesn't get that strategic focus. Brilliant insight, Matthew. Claire, any thoughts on that?
I'm seeing that a lot. And in fact, I'm seeing that increase. So I think we went through a period of time where CXO was becoming quite established on boards. I think that we were seeing more of them pop up. But I think now over the past couple of years, particularly as the market has changed and the board is relooking at things and the focus is probably more on cost saving, I'm seeing that less. And certainly the businesses I work with, I'm seeing customer experience typically with CMO. And I think those two normally are joined together, and that's not the right place for it. I think it also means then that there are real difficulties, which maybe you experience, Matthew, in when you are working within the customer experience department, because you're having to fight for your voice to be heard really against all the marketing initiatives that there are. And businesses typically always focus more heavily on marketing traditionally. So I think to answer your question, I am working with more businesses that don't have that senior role as a standalone role for customer experience on the board.
Interesting. Siobhan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd agree with Claire on that, but the percentage is very low. It is increasing, I think, a little bit very slowly. we see a lot of organizations that we deal with that CX is almost a side of the desk job, that you have a role, be it in operational, be it in marketing, whatever it might be, and CX is tagged on to that, when actually it needs to be standalone. It needs to be at the most senior level. It's not happening as much as it should be. And really, I suppose it's up to CX practitioners to start making that happen, and to carving out that role for them, finding their allies at the board level, and petitioning for a seat at the table.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And my own comment on that would be, yeah, I think, if there was an opportunity, I really do think that the CX director should move more into that kind of commercial role. Yes, we do have a chief customer officer that's out there, and we're seeing more and more of that, and that takes on a whole number of roles. But certainly, my biggest fear for our discipline is that we start to get fuzzy with our information give to the board. And if we do that, we will fall into the trap of the IT departments, of the marketing departments, where we talk in different languages that people don't understand. We need to avoid that at all costs. And time again, I work with people in large organizations who are trying to impress the board with maybe a very specific report. And when I read the report, it's just like full of jargon. And I'm going, stop doing this. I think our greatest asset is the simplicity of our discipline. So keep the communications between you and the board simple, and you get pulled in. And I think that when digital took over the world, one of its biggest failures was no one understood what the IT director was saying. So we don't want to fall into that trap. And I think it's a great question to ask, and let's monitor that going forward. I see a question here, Michael Spawn. Do you make the report that you just mentioned available to see? Yes, we do. This report that we do ourselves is based on a global report, but we do one for our own domestic market, and we're very happy to share that with you, because there's some phenomenal insights that would be useful for you, Frederick. So we'll make sure that we get you a copy of that so that you can see that. I see Corolla to everybody. Any source or written legitimation on the right balance of AI and human support touch with consumer and customers? I think that's a great question, Corolla. And we produced a ebook about a year and a half ago called Digital When I Want It, Human When I Need It. So we'll make sure that you get that. And there's a new book going to be launched in the next couple of weeks, all around metrics, funny enough. So for those of you who are interested, let us know, and we will be delighted to get that out to you. Now, I'm doing your work here, Louise, but I'm conscious that you have lost your voice. Will I continue if with these questions? Yes, the recording is going to be sent to everybody who's on the call and those that couldn't make it. Am I missing any questions here, Louise? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so Gemma asked, are there any stats around to show the actual damage that incident caused to McDonald's?
Oh, wow.
That's a really good question, Gemma. I'm not aware of the stats if they are published. Look, McDonald's are a mammoth. Like I'm sure that the impact to them was short-lived, and they were well able to recover from it. But it's just, I suppose, the learning is in the case study itself. So no, I don't have the stats on that, I'm afraid.
That's very interesting. Anything else coming your way, Louise, that you can drop in here?
I think we've gone through all the questions.
I think we have. I think I like Frederick's. It's like it can be like herding cats.
Matthew, yes. We feel your pain, great. Matthew.
This is great. Now, we said that we would get you out in 45 minutes. We're a little bit over, but and I see people. Yes, we will get those ebooks to you. We'd be delighted to pass those on. But Claire, any final thoughts before we say goodbye to all?
I think one thing that we didn't talk about very much was employees. And I think, remember, employee and customer experience, HR should be your friend. We are so inextricably linked. Be each other's allies, and really take kind of combined initiatives for people retention to the board.
That's a really, really important point. And the funny thing too, Claire, is that HR is another group out there that have lost the voice at the boardroom table. The old role of HR used to be getting people, their staff members, to do things they never dreamt possible. but their role has changed dramatically to hiring and firing. It's become a real legal role within the organization. So they're waving their flag to say, how can we be relevant? I love that piece around engage with HR and also all other departments, because in essence, the CX role really isn't it? It is about getting us all to work better together. And that is listening and creating friends with each of those departments. I love that advice. I think that's really good. I'm getting tons of loving it here, Claire. Wonderful message. And all I can say is, Claire, thank you so much for joining us today. It is a subject matter that we have to get involved with much more as we go forward. We've been avoiding it, and I think today's session was so simple, very, very clear. And thank you for your time. Siobhan, as always, you're a star. It's great to have you on board. And Louise, as always, thank you for getting us all here. And we will share this, all the insights that we did with all of you. We'll have links on our summary, and when we send you the recordings, we'll link you to the reports that we mentioned for those of you that are interested. But we probably won't see you till 2026, everybody.
Yes.
Have a fantastic holiday break, or as we say here, a Christmas break. Enjoy yourself. And Claire, one more time, you're a star. We were delighted
Thank you
to have
so
you
much,
on board.
Claire.
And we'll talk to you soon again for sure. All righty.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
And thanks, everyone, for joining. Take care.
Take care. Bye.